TF2 maps. Over the past 17 years, we've gotten a bunch of them. But do they have lore? Not much, but it does exist, and I like to cover that. Let's first go over this map, which provides the geography for TF2's main setting. TF2 is primarily set in the fictional Badlands region of New Mexico. As you can see, several of the official maps are within close vicinity of each other. We're going to focus on all of these locations today. TF2 maps do some interesting world building, where seemingly normal facilities turn out to be housing some pretty high-tech stuff, which then goes to show the extent the Mann brothers are willing to take for control over a single gravel pit. Starting off with Two Fort, it was built sometime in the late 19th century and the early 20th century as a water mill for the nearby town of the same name. It's not known how the water gets from here to the town, but we do know that it's contaminated with lead, so much so that the town's population has gone brain dead from it. In-game, both Red and Blue have constructed command centers underneath the forts to house their intelligence. Both teams are currently using the old structures as a way to hide the fact that the war is taking place. However, both teams probably had a different theme in mind when redesigning the bases. Red has kept most of the original structure intact. They basically turned the place into a giant farm. On the other hand, Blue has given the entire fort an industrial makeover. Much of the building is made up of concrete and different metals. In fact, the entire Blue region seems to be one giant factory. Some more interesting world building is done on the invasion version of Two Fort. If we look underground, we can see what each team is doing with the alien technology. Red has opted to construct some high-tech weapons, while Blue is conducting some mad experiments in their basement. Just south of Two Fort is Dustbowl. Dustbowl seems to be a former mining facility. The first two stages of Dustbowl mainly show this off since the blue team is required to travel through a series of mine shafts. In the game, it can be assumed that Red was the first team to capture Dustbowl. So why is Blue even bothering to invade an abandoned mine? Well, you see, it's the perfect place for Red to hide their giant missile. Red hasn't really done much in terms of construction, but they have redesigned the area surrounding the missile. It's in this area where we notice more of the construction is modernized. As to why they would put a missile here, the reason is actually pretty clever. It's an abandoned mine in the middle of nowhere in a region that most people have probably forgot about. The chances of people passing by is pretty low. Our next location doesn't appear to be as barren. Pipeline takes place in some type of factory or plant. Since it's located near the Badwater pipeline, it can be assumed some type of chemical or gas is manufactured here. The factory itself is still in very good shape. None of the buildings look abandoned or appear to have fallen into a state of disrepair. Red and Blue have seemed to give their respective territories a new paint job, but otherwise they haven't really done much to change the place. It's hard to tell what each team is trying to accomplish here. When moving the cart to the very last there, when the actual explosion happens, it kind of just sets the floor on fire. Not much to pipeline, so we're gonna move on. If we go west, we will stumble upon Well. Well is a train yard. Unlike the other maps we have covered so far, Well does seem to show signs of activity. You can tell since at the midpoint, trains will occasionally pass through the area. So this train yard is still very much in use. Prior to the Mercs fighting, it was probably used as one of the places that Manco used to send freight trains. Here we have a similar case to Two Fort, where each of the buildings is some type of cover-up. At the end of each base, we can find another giant missile. Red has chosen a distillery as their disguise. On the other hand, Blue hasn't really named their facility, but my guess is that it's some type of chemical processing plant. As such, the interiors of each building do have their differences. Red has put a bunch of barrels in storage on their side, meanwhile Blue has placed a bunch of vats. And that's it for Well, one of the only locations that doesn't seem to be abandoned. If we go north, we will find ourselves in the Sea of Gravel, which leads us to Gravelpit. Gravelpit is the center of what the Mercs are fighting over, gravel. You can probably guess what the entire place was used for just from looking at the map's background, or just reading the name. However, it's not just the gravel that the teams are fighting over, it's the giant laser gun housed on top of Point C that serves as the most valuable asset. Gravelpit does some interesting world building through each of the points we are required to capture. Points A and B are important to secure since they're going to be crucial in firing the laser. Point A is a radio tower while Point B is a radar dish and satellite. Both objectives are most likely needed for targeting the laser. Gravelpit is most likely the most important territory to secure for both of the teams, because of how much sheer damage the laser gun can cause. If we go to the very northern region of the map, we can find ourselves in Thunder Mountain. Thunder Mountain is most likely a lumber mill or lodging area. It's never really hinted at what the structures are used for. However, we do know that the place isn't totally abandoned. Around the first stage, you can see a train that occasionally passes by in the distance. Red seems to be using Thunder Mountain to be storing some type of weapons, whether it be bombs or straight up nukes. The last stage includes the spiral with a giant pit in the center, which must contain something if Blue wants to go out of their way to push a bomb into it. This is kind of confirmed by the official update page since we do see a mushroom cloud in the background of Thunder Mountain. It tells us that nukes are being tested in the area surrounding it. Let's now head down the mountains and go to Badwater. By far one of the most famous payload maps, Badwater doesn't really have much going for it on the surface. According to the wiki, Badwater was also used as a mine for various materials, similarly to Dustbowl. And this does make sense. Since Badwater is a basin, the land has a lower elevation. This makes it easier to extract resources like coal, copper, and maybe even gold. The various buildings don't really have a defined use. My guess is that they were mainly used for storage. However, we do know the map's purpose from a story perspective. This is just another case where Red has taken control of another territory and Blue is trying to capture it. This time, Red has turned the last point into a bomb storage facility. Underneath the final terminus, we can find a bunch of bombs that have just waiting to be used. And what better way to get rid of a bomb storage than with a bomb on wheels? Now I'm going to cover a couple more bonus locations that aren't listed on this map. So Badlands, as in the map itself in-game, not the region. This isn't marked anywhere, but my guess is that it's located somewhere around Badwater since the terrain is similar. Badlands takes place on a rail line of sorts. One that currently doesn't seem to be active, but must hold some significance if both teams are trying to get a hold of it. Well, it's probable that various freight is loaded here and docked in the different buildings we see nearby. Each team has a base that's sort of carved into the side of a rock formation. However, their purpose isn't really quite clear, because for most part the interiors are pretty barren, and plus all we get for the last point is just this random lift. That's it. But otherwise, I don't really have much to say about Badlands. Here we have another popular payload map. No one really knows what Upward was used for or what it's really supposed to be in that regard. The official update page more or less confirms that the place was abandoned a long time ago. To me, it looks like some type of quarry. Reddit seemed to use the last point for something involving this giant pit. As to what it contains, again, no one knows. Despite being abandoned, they've definitely gone out of their way to fortify the area surrounding the map's terminus. But the context of the map starts to make a bit more sense once we pay attention to the map's background details. Around the third point, we can find this giant cargo ship that's just docked at this port here. Thing is, I don't remember this cargo ship being here despite the amount of rounds I've played on Upward. So if a giant cargo ship is needed, then Red is definitely trying to conduct some high-stakes mining operation in the area. Doomsday. So much lore for one map that no one plays at all. Doomsday is basically a cover-up for a failed rocket launch. On Doomsday, players are required to bring suitcases of Australium to the rocket in order to fuel it. The reason as to why you're bringing a bunch of Australium to this rocket is because you want to help a monkey named Poopy Joe reach the moon. We're supposedly helping him beat his Soviet rival named Vladimir Bananas. However, something goes horribly wrong during the launch, causing the rocket to blow up one of the team's bases. Poopy Joe is also killed in the crash.
Gentlemen, this never happened.
In the comics, though, it's revealed that the Administrator sabotaged the rocket launch, all because she wanted the Australium that was being used as the fuel. That begs the question, what was in the suitcases then? As it turns out, Saxon Hill came in last minute and swapped the Australium for defective Gravelwater. After the failed rocket launch, the US Senate conducted an entire investigation into Manco. However, the investigation got closed when the Administrator decided to get involved. By far, Doomsday is the only TF2 map that I know of, at least, that has this much of a lore significance. With that being said, I'm gonna end off the video here. I'm aware that other maps also have their own story to them as well, but I decided to cover only the mainline locations on this map here. Anyways, I will see you later. Bye.